All right, Jabosai, good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our annual Talmud Torah sponsor for Daf Yomi, the Tilson zechus for besuros, tovos for all of Am Yisroel. Halavai v'shmizuach and to see that bracha is kaim bekarov. Our week of learning sponsors, Rabbi Aryeh Chana Richter, in memory of Rabbi Richter's dear grandmother, Sarah Bas Shimon, who passed away earlier this week. Talmud Torah sponsor for this month, the Kelman Family, for dedicating the Shimon Drashos in memory of Amit Ben David Levy, bracha of Itay Levy, killed fighting in Gaza on the first night of Chanukah. Our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Eliyahu Devora Rahmanfar, in memory of Eliyahu's grandfather, ניסן ben Abraham, and in honor of their son Yehuda on his 11th birthday. We thank Hakodosh Baruch Hu for the release of the more hostages today, and Emir Hashem hope to see all of our hostages come home with shalom and bekarov. But also with that, let us, we have a lot to do today. Guten Chodesh, everyone. Incredible Gemara ahead of us. We are picking up today's daf is Mem Daled 44. We are actually picking up Emir Hashem on Mem Gimel Amud Beis 43b at the Mishnah. Really beautiful Gemara. When the convicted individual, call him Ruvain, right? So again, remember, following along in our progression, Ruvain was accused of killing Shimon. Ruvain's been found guilty by a Beis Din. So when Ruvain was approximately, when he was 10 amos away from the Beis Haskila, from the execution spot, Omrim Lo, they would say to him, Hisvada, commit vidui, or recite vidui. Shekindera kalmum misvadin. Because again, it's the derech of people who are being put to death by Beis Din to recite vidui, to confess. Right? Because even though, again, death itself is a kapara, is an atonement, but nevertheless, the act of reciting vidui prior to the execution is in and of itself a profound form of atonement. So they call it, the Gemara says, Mishnah says, because shekol misvada, anyone who does vidui before he dies, yesh lo chelik l'olam haba, has a portion in the world to come. Shekin matzinu ba'achan, for we see by Achan. Now, who is Achan? So remember again, as we're going to see in just a little bit, when Klal Yisrael comes into Eretz Yisrael, there was a war that they fought in Yericho. Yoshua said that no one is allowed to partake of the spoils of Yericho, and whoever does so would be liable to death. Achan went ahead and took of the spoils of Yericho. Again, we'll see more about that story in just a little bit. Shneimar lo Yoshua b'ni simna kavod la'Hashem Elokei Yisrael b'tein lo toda. So literally, again, you see Yoshua saying to Achan, give kavod to Hashem, the God of Israel, b'tein lo toda. Now we'll see what this means. Literally, give him thanks. We'll have to see exactly what this particular statement means. Vayan Achan as Yoshua. So Achan answered Yoshua, and he said as follows: Vayomer, Amna anochi chatasi chazos v'chazos. So Achan said, when confronted by Yoshua, Achan said, "Yeah, it was me. I went ahead and sinned, and in fact, I did so and so and so and so." How do you know ultimately again that Achan was atoned as a result, that he received atonement as a result of his vidui? Shneimar bayom Yoshua ma'achartanu yarkich Hashem bayom hazeh. So Yoshua says to Achan, Achan, just as you have destabilized us, literally again muddied the waters for us, so Hashem should go ahead and obscure you on this day. So the Gemara darshans, it's only on this day, i.e. in this world, that you are, so to speak, punished. But you are not compromised in the world to come. So you see over here that halacha l'maisa, because Achan did shuvah, Achan did vidui, therefore ultimately again he is forgiven. Incredible. What happens if a person doesn't know how to do vidui? Let's say a person just doesn't know how to recite vidui. Omrim lo, so we say to him, Emar, say the following: Tehei misasi kapara akol avonasi. My death should be an atonement akol avonasi for all of my sinful behavior. Right? My death should be an atonement for all of my sins. Rabbi Yehuda says, so I'll say, so again, so this, I just want to point out something very interesting. There is a concept ultimately of saying vidui when a person is dying, what they call vidui shchimira. When when a person is dying. So there is a longer form of that vidui, but there's also a shortened form of that vidui that essentially just says, Tehei misasi kapara akol avonosai. So that again, let this be a kapara on all of my averos, and that's it. That's the entirety of the vidui. Rabbi Yehuda says, Im hayayodea shehu mezumam. Rabbi Yehuda says, if at the end of the day, let's say Reuven knows that he's innocent, right? We'll say, as much as Beis Din says that the defendant, if you're innocent, don't worry about anything. Sometimes things could happen. So let's say Reuven's being led out to be executed, and he knows he's innocent. So what does the Mishnah say? Omer tehemi sasi kapara akol avonasai chutz mi avon zeh. Reuven could say, my death should be an atonement for all of my averos, except for this avera. So the Gemara says, Amrlo im kain Yehu kol adam omer kain kadei lenakos atzmo. So Rabbi Yehuda says, if that's the case, every person is going to go ahead and end up saying, they said to him, Kain. So remember, Rabbi Yehuda says, essentially, you say vidui before you're being let out, but if you believe you're innocent, so you should say, my death should be an atonement for all of my averos, except for this, because I didn't do this. So essentially, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda, if you put in that formulation, everyone's going to say that, because everyone maintains their innocence, or at least most people maintain their innocence, all the way until the end. Okay? So the Gemara says in the Gemara, Tan Rabbanan, na el lashon bakasha. So interestingly enough, so remember again, Yoshua says to Achan. Achan is the paradigmatic example of this concept of saying vidui prior to go ahead and being killed. So Yoshua says to Achan, please, right? He asks him, no, the lashon over here is v'haged na li ma'asisi. Please tell me what happened. Ein na el lashon bakasha. Ultimately, again, na is a request. What does this mean? B'shashon Hakodosh Baruch Hu Yoshua chata Yisrael. So Hakodosh Baruch Hu said to Yoshua, Klal Yisrael has sinned. Klal Yisrael has sinned. Amar lefarad Rebbeinu Shalom mi chata. So remember again, Hashem was telling Yoshua that someone took from the spoils of Yericho who wasn't supposed to. So Yoshua says, "Okay, Hashem, tell me who did it. Who did it? Who took from the spoils? Who took from the spoils of Yericho?" Amar Levi. So listen to this. Hashem says, "What? Am I a snitch? Right? I'm going to tell you who did it. Lech hapel goralos. Go and cast lots. Cast lots. Cast the lottery, and you'll see who the perpetrator was." Halach vipel goralos. So sure enough, Yoshua went and he cast lotteries. The nafal hagoral al achan, and the goral and the lottery fell on Achan. Amrlo Yoshua. So Amrlo Yoshua. So now Yoshua confronts Achan. He says, Achan, you went ahead and you committed this avera. So Achan says, really? A lottery? That's how you're assuming I'm guilty? After all, again, so Achan said, Yoshua, if I cast a lottery between you and Elazar, right? You're the Kohen Gadol, right? You're the Navi. Elazar is the Kohen Gadol. The lottery is going to fall out on one of the two of you. The point over here that Achan was trying to make is a lottery is a very non-scientific approach to these things. So how are you determining my guilt through a lottery? So Yoshua responds back to him, please Achan, al totzi laz al garolos. Whatever you do not cast aspersions on the lottery. Why not? Sha'asida Eretz Yisrael she'tischalik begorol. Because Eretz Yisrael is ultimately going to be divided up through a lottery. Lottery is a very important mechanism in the division and distribution of Eretz Yisrael. So Achan, if you start casting aspersions on the lottery, it's ultimately going to cast aspersions on the division of Eretz Yisrael. So he goes on, he says, Shene Emar, Ach Begor Yichalik Esaretz. So what does it mean? Tein Toda. So what does it mean? Yoshua says to Achan, please give over. Amravino Shachudi Shachte. Literally, Yoshua bribed Achan with words. What does this mean? Sinimar says, Klum Nevakish Mimcha Elahoda, Tein Lo Toda Vihi Pater. So Yoshua lied a little bit to Achan. He said, Achan, all you have to do is just confess. And after you confess, the whole thing is over. All we need is a confession, and then we're done. Miyad vaya'an achan es Yoshua vayomer amna hanochi chatasi l'Hashem Elokei Yisrael kazos v'kazos asisi. And Achan said, yeah, it was me. I did it. Right? This is what I did. And he admitted that he had stolen some of the spoils from Yericho. Am Ravasi, Am Rabbi Chanina, Melamed, Shema'al Achan b'shlosha charamim. So interesting enough, I will say, it turns out that Achan didn't just violate the Cherem. Cherem means, I will say, Cherem, we're used to Cherem in a particular context, where Beis Din puts someone in Cherem. And Cherem also means the concept where the Beis Din, right, goes in and says something is off limits. So, for example, Yericho was Cherem, right? The spoils of Yericho were Cherem. So the Gemara says something very interesting, that Achan went ahead and violated 3 different charamim. First of the white lines on the bottom, Shnayim b'mei Moshe, ve'echad mei Yoshua, 2 during the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, and 1 during the days of Yoshua. So apparently, although we don't necessarily see it stated, but apparently during a number of the wars under Moshe Rabbeinu, there was also a cherem. Do not go ahead and partake of the spoils. Of the war. So apparently Achan didn't just violate the 1 by Yericho, but he violated 2 by Moshe, 1 by Yoshua. Shneimar, kazos v'kazos asisi. Because there are 3 Lashonos over here. Like this one, and like this one, have I done. So ultimately, again, that represents 3 acts of performance, or 3 acts of violation. 3 charamim he violated. Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Mishra, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Chamisha. He violated 3 charamim. Arba b'mei Moshe, ve'achad mei Yoshua. Shneimar, anochi chatasi, Vikazos asisi. Okay. Va'ad hashta, my tamelo and anish. So what, up until this point, so if that's the case, that Achan in fact violated multiple other charamim, why is he only punished after Yericho? Shouldn't he have been punished earlier than that? So Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Elazar is beautiful Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, lefi shelo anshu ala nestaros ad she'avru es hayardin. So I'll say this is incredible. One of the hallmarks of Klal Yisrael is Klal Yisrael Revim Zeh Bazeh, mutual responsibility. Now, mutual responsibility is that not only are we responsible to take care of each other, but halacha l'maisa, I'm responsible for your averos, you're responsible for my averos. That's the way it works. I share in the zechus of your mitzvos, you share in the zechus of my mitzvos. That means mutual responsibility. So there's this concept, the Gemara says, and this is really quite dramatic, that we're responsible for each other even when it comes to the averos that maybe we don't know about. What if I commit an avera privately? No one else knows about it. So halacha say, is there mutual responsibility for that avera? So listen to this. So Rabbi Elazar Shimon says, there is, but that mutual responsibility only occurred when? After we crossed the Yarden. So therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, even though Achan went ahead and violated multiple other charamim prior to Yericho, no one knew about it. And there's only mutual responsibility for private averos after we cross over the Yarden. Therefore, the only one Klal Yisrael was held accountable for was what? Was Yericho. Kitanai says this is actually machlokes. Listen to this. So literally translated, that which is hidden is to Hakodosh Baruch Hu, but that which is revealed is for us and for our children for all eternity. So Gemara says, "Nama nakod al lanu v'ulavanenu v'al ayin shebad." Right. So why is it? Well, if you look in the Sefer Torah, there are dots over. Lanu ulevanenu and the ayin of ad. Melamed shlo anash al nestaros at she'avras hayardin divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda holds, it teaches us that the din of mutual responsibility didn't apply for private averos until after we crossed into Eretz Yisrael. What do you see? This is absolutely incredible. There is a heightened level of mutual responsibility in Eretz Yisrael more than exists in Galus. In other words, when we are outside Eretz Yisrael, there's still mutual responsibility. But when we are in Eretz Yisrael, there is a heightened sense of mutual responsibility. So the Rabbi Yirmiyah, whoa, say, hold up over here. Is there ever liability for private averos? Right? So I say, let me get this straight. I understand that we are responsible for the public behavior of one another. But is there such a thing that I'm responsible for your private averos, you're responsible for my private averos? That is a very difficult thing to swallow, right? If you think about it, that's a pretty overwhelming concept. So the Gemara says, V'halo kvar ne'emar ad olam, ela kashim shlo onash al anastaros, kach lo onash al onshin shebegalui ad she'avri Yisrael as hayarden. Rather, we're going to both say this second model. Rabbi Nechemiah says like this: there is never mutual responsibility for hidden averos. For secret, right? That there can't be. It can't operate that way. Lemay say, I can't be responsible for the things you do in private. You can't be responsible for things that I do in private. That's impossible. But again, when it comes to the niglos, the revealed averos, there was responsibility for that only once we entered into Eretz Yisrael. No responsibility for that before we entered into Eretz Yisrael. Ella, if that's the case, top of Mendalit, Achan, my time ianush. So if that's the case, I will say, then that essentially Achan's taking of property from Yericho was a private act. So if that's the case, even though it happened in Eretz Yisrael, why would there be any level of mutual responsibility for that? Ella Achan my time ianush. To which the Gemara says, Mishum dahavu yadi bei ishta ubanav. Ultimately, again, because his family knew about it. Even though it wasn't public that Klal Yisrael knew about it, it was public enough that his family knew about it, and they didn't do anything about it, creates a sense of mutual responsibility. Also, Rashi says over here, okay, no, not yet. So I just want to point out what a tremendous Moshe Haskell, that there is there is a level of mutual responsibility that a family has. And if a family knows that one of the members of the family is struggling with something and doesn't do anything to help with that struggle, there is responsibility for those failures. Overwhelming. So in other words, it's just whatever is true in Klal Yisrael is true on the microcosm of the family as well. So in Klal Yisrael, we're responsible for each other. Not with the stuff we don't know about. I can't be responsible for the secret stuff of you. You can't be responsible for the private things of mine. But for the revealed things, we're absolutely responsible. And same thing in the family. I can't know what my family members are doing in private. But if I know that my family members are struggling with things, and it's clear that they're struggling with things, failure to do anything about it and help results in a profound sense of liability and responsibility. Incredible. So Gemara says, Chata Yisrael. So remember the Gemara says that the sin of Achan was the sin of Klal Yisrael. So we'll say, so this is actually very, very beautiful. Because remember, this is Hakodosh Baruch Hu speaking to Yoshua. Chata Yisrael, v'gam avru es brisi. Klal Yisrael sinned and they violated my aver. Now, what we're seeing over now this is beginning to come together. It was Achan who sinned. But Klal Yisrael was held responsible for the sin of Achan because of the din of Arvus, because of the din of mutual responsibility. But there's only mutual responsibility for publicly known Averos. What's the answer? They did know about it. Who knew about it? His wife knew about it. His kids knew about it. That is enough to create public knowledge and therefore to create mutual responsibility and liability. So we'll say this is a beautiful Gemara. Chata Yisrael, Hakodosh Baruch Hu says to Yoshua, Klal Yisrael sinned. Rabbi Abba bar Zavda, afapi shechata Yisrael hu. This is so beautiful. I will say, what do you see from here? You see from here that halacha l'maisa, even though a Jew sinned, he's still called the Yisrael. Yisrael afa pisha, right? Because again, chata Yisrael. Even though, so Hakodosh Baruch Hu was saying, even though Klal Yisrael sinned, they're still called Klal Yisrael. They're still called Klal Yisrael. So I will say, there's a beautiful piece by the Balatanya. The Balatanya writes as follows. He says, listen to this phrase. He says, Hashem Yisrael Eno Shem Toar. He says the name Yisrael is not a descriptive term. For example, what are examples of descriptive terms? Tzaddik, Rasha. Those are descriptive terms, right? Tzaddik is descriptor of who you are. Rasha, he says that's not Yisrael. He says, what's the difference between a non-descriptive term and a descriptive term? He said descriptive terms could change. If someone is a tzaddik today, he could be a Rasha tomorrow. Someone's a Rasha today, he could be a tzaddik tomorrow. Elohu Shem Etzem. Yisrael is not a descriptive term. Yisrael is a statement about the essence of the individual. And he says, Ki nishmos Yisrael hem chelek elokami ma'al mamish. Just like again the opening lashon in Tanya, because the neshama of a Jew is mamish a spark, is a chelek, is a piece of Hakodosh Baruch Hu. Memela eno yochol lehishtanos. It's not changeable. You can't change that. That is an immutable truth. V'kasher Yisrael chodei hu pogem. Okay, so he goes on. So he said, this is absolutely incredible. What does it mean that Yisrael shechata? Lashon over here is chata Yisrael, afapi shechata Yisrael hu. Again, I will say the fact that I'm a Yid, the fact that I'm Yisroel, the fact that I have a neshama, the fact that I'm a spark of Hakodosh Baruch Hu, there's nothing in the world that I can do to change that. I can commit the worst Aveira possibly imaginable, Chas v'shalom. And even if I do that, I'm still Yisrael. Why? Because it's being a Yisrael, being a Yid, which by definition means that I have a neshama that is a spark of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is what the Baal Tanya calls a shem etzem. Right? It's ultimately, it's not a descriptive term, but rather, again, it's a shem etzem. It's not a shem toar, it's a shem etzem. There are things that are shem toar, which are descriptive terms, and shem etzem, which ultimately, again, is an essence term. Descriptive terms change based on where you're holding in life. A shem etzem, an essence term, that remains intact no matter what I do. And I both say, this is probably one of the most important Gemaras in all of Shas, because this is the reason why tshuva is possible. Why is it that no matter how badly I debase myself, that I have the ability to rehabilitate myself? Why is that? Right? We should say there aren't just certain Averas that after a certain point, like you've hit the point of no return, there's no going back, that's it. So why do I have the ability to bring myself back, not just like from the edge of the cliff, but even if I went over the spiritual cliff, I can still bring myself back. Why? Because I'm a Yisrael. Because I have a neshama. And that neshama is a spark of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And no matter what I do in life, I can't change that. I can't change it. And because I can't change it, it's always there. And because it's always there, those represent the fundamental building blocks that I could use to rebuild myself. So that's what it means when it says, no matter what I do, I might not be a tzaddik any longer. I may actually be a rasha right now. That's possible. But no matter what those descriptive terms may be, my essence term of Yisrael is always intact. And if that's there, then the ability to spiritually and personally rehabilitate is always present as well. Incredible. This is what people say, a common expression. People say, Asa dekai bene chilfi, asa shmei va'asa karile. Even a myrtle branch that is nestled amongst the willows is still a myrtle branch. And it's still called a willow. In other words, you could have a myrtle branch, you could have a hadas that is surrounded by willow branches. All around it still has its identity. And no matter how long it's there, no matter how much it's outnumbered, no matter how camouflaged maybe it becomes in all of the willow branches, it still remains a myrtle. Incredible. V'gam avru es brisi, asher tzivisi osam. Hakodosh Baruch Hu tells Yoshua, Klal Yisrael also violated the covenant that I commanded them. Gam lokchu min acherim, gam ganvu, gam kachashu, gam samu b'keileihem. So it's talking about all the things. Now again, I just want to point out, Klal Yisrael didn't do this. It was Achan who did it, but Klal Yisrael is being held responsible. Am Rabbi Aryeh Chana Richter bar mistarfa. B'lamed she'avar Achan achamishe chumshei Torah. You see from here that Achan violated all. He didn't just take from the spoils of Yericho. He violated halacha, right? And he violated everything that's written in the 5 books of the Chumash. Shne'emar chamisha gam. A little bit of a play on words over here. Chamisha gam. He also violated the Chamisha, the 5 books of the Torah. Am Rabbi Aryeh Mishum Rabbi Yehuda bar misparta. Achan moshech bar Allah sohaya. Achan tried to cover up his bris milah. Right, we saw this before by Adam Rishon also. Should cover his bris milah. Ksiv hachal, it says over here, v'gam avru es brisi. Ksiv hasam es brisi hafer. So pshita, that's obvious. What would you have thought? Mitzvah begufei lo pakar. Maybe not. Maybe even though Achan was a sinner, ultimately, again, perhaps he would not go so far so as to cover up a mitzvah on his body. Kamash malam that he did. V'chi asan avala b'Yisrael. He did something terrible in Klal Yisrael. Am Rabbi Abba bar Zavda melamed sheba'al Achan na'ara hamurasa. Nachan had relations with a betrothed girl. The Ksiv Hacha says over here, V'chi Asan Avala, Ksiv Hasan V'chi Astan Avala B'Yisrael. So Pshita, Maltem, what would you have thought? Kuli Hai, Lo Pakar Nafshe. That far, Achan wouldn't do, right? He wouldn't make, the Pakar Nafshe, but it's actually very profound. Pakar Nafshe means made his soul hefker. The act of sin, by definition, is making your soul hefker. We'll say, isn't that incredible? Right? None of us are taking our wallet, putting it on the table, and say, you know what, Hefker, my credit cards, go, enjoy the cash, all yours. No one in their right mind says that. Why? Because my wallet is valuable. Yet, my neshama, which is the most valuable thing of all, when I commit an Aveira, essentially what I'm saying is, it's Hefker. It's hefker, whatever it is, do what you want, do how you want, what you want, it doesn't make a difference. So I'll say, none of us in our right mind would ever actually, choose to do that, yet the default reality of the commission of an Aveira is making my neshama hefker. It's incredible. Ravina says, Dine kinara amurasa. That ultimately Achan was judged like an Ara Murasa, Dibiskila, ultimately against Gemara. So now what does this mean? What do you do with this Gemara? That Achan violated all 5 books of the Torah, that Achan went ahead and tried to cover up his bris milah, that he had relations with an Ara Murasa. Like, first of all, that's not, or the Gemara is learning it out from like Gezerah Shavas. But it sounds like, or it feels like we may even be going out of our way to find culpability for Achan. So I think what the Gemara is saying is like this. It's important, we speak about this all the time. Sin doesn't just occur. And dramatic sin doesn't just dramatically occur. Very often, big averos are a result of a culmination of smaller missteps that may by themselves be relatively innocuous, but they lead me on a particular path and they put me on a particular trajectory which manifests and results in truly negative behavior. So what the Gemara is saying is like this: whether Achan actually had relations with the Nara Murasa, tried to cover his bris milah, violated, it's not what the Gemara is saying. What the Gemara is saying is like this: Achan, Yoshua gave you an explicit command. Don't partake of the spoils of Yericho. Remember, the Jews are wealthy. The Jews are wealthy. Right? Remember, they came out of Egypt with incredible amount of wealth. Everybody's wealthy. Everybody's got plenty of money. So, Achan, how do you make such a dramatic mistake that compromised you, your family, and Klal Yisrael? What's the answer? The answer is, this wasn't the first mistake. Achan was making multiple mistakes all along the way. He was committing multiple averos all along the way. And in life, when you get used to making bad decisions, even if they're small, bad decisions, that leads you down a path. And that path is going to end only in one way: a really bad, big decision. That's why I both say, sometimes in life we think that it's like the big crossroad decisions that make a difference. That's true, but it's also the everyday decisions that we make that fundamentally chart our course forward. And if I'm consistently making the wrong small decisions, maybe they're sinful, maybe they're relatively innocuous by themselves, but they come together, they conglomerate, and they become a derech of my life. And that derech sometimes just results in the most catastrophic circumstances. That's what Chazal are saying over here. Don't think that Achan just woke up that morning and said, "Hey, let me partake of some of those spoils of Yericho," even though Moshe Rabbeinu, Yoshua told me not to. That's not what happened over here. The ability to violate the words of Yoshua and take the spoils of Yericho was the culmination of a series of prior decisions that put Achan on a path. This is why I was saying this so often. It is so important to live with a sense of mindfulness, of awareness, to recognize every single decision has consequences. Big or small, every decision puts me on a derech. And if I live that with mindfulness, I set myself up for ultimate good. If I live without mindfulness, one day I find myself taking the spoils of Yericho. So the Gemara goes right there. Amrish Lagish, Amrish Kalusa, L'Rav Huna, Ksiv, Vaikach Yoshua's Achan ben Zarach, Ves Hakesef, Ves Haderes, Es Lashon Azav, Ves Bona, Ves Benosa, Ves Shara, Ves Chamora, Ves Sona, Ves Olo, Ves Kala Shalo. So I say now, the pasuk says Yoshua took Achan, his entire family, and all of the spoils. So the Gemara says, Im hu chata, Banav Benosa Machatu. I don't understand. So it sounds like Yoshua is executing Achan's family, but Achan is the one who committed the Avera. What did his family do wrong? The Gemara says, using that same logic, it also says he assembled Klal Yisrael. So again, if Achan committed the sin, what did Klal Yisrael do? So the Gemara says, you're right, of course, Achan's family wasn't executed, just as Klal Yisrael wasn't executed. So what happened over here? Why did Moshe Rabbeinu gather them for the execution of Achan? To give them Musar. To show them ultimately again that what was done was incorrect, and it's important, like we see, v'chala Am Yisroel, just like again, executions were public, in order that the people should understand the severity of actions. So to Yoshua gathered the family of Achan and Klal Yisrael as well. Vayisrifu osam be'ish, vayiskelu osam ba'avanim. So Yoshua went ahead and burnt everything. Everything means Achan. It sounds like it means Achan, his possessions, and stoned them. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. Betarti? Why do you need burning and stoning? Like, what's the pshat with that? Ravina, haroi l'sreif l'sreif, haroi l'skila l'skila. No. What it means is The things that were supposed to be burned were burned, like inanimate objects, property, and the things that were supposed to be stoned, i.e. achan, and livestock, was stoned. The Gemara says, "Ve'era b'shalal adaras shinar achas tova u'masayim shkalim kesef." So again, now the Navi details what Achan took. Right, I saw in the booty, in the spoils, adaras shinar tova u'masayim shkalim kesef. Amrav, it's still a demilsa. It was a cloak of fine wool. Shmuel says, "Sarbala d'tzrifa," a cloak of dyed wool. Vayatzikim lifnei Hashem. Amrav Nachman ba. The Chavtam Lifnei HaMakom. Supposed to say this is incredible. So what does it mean by Yitzchak Lifnei Hashem? Yoshua took some of the spoils and he threw it down in front of Hakodosh Baruch Hu. So listen to this. So Amar Nachman, Ba v'Chavtam Lifnei HaMakom. He threw it down before Hashem. Amar the father of Ribono Shel Olam Al Iloti Harig Rubas Shal Sanhedrin Abosai. Now remember, how did Yoshua know? How did anyone know that Achan took from the spoils of Yericho? How did he know that? Because remember again, in one of the subsequent battles, 36 Jews died, as we're going to see. 36 Jews died. Now remember again, the Jews were promised victory. So if 36 Jews are dying in battle, that must mean what? Something's going on over here. So Yoshua comes, and almost like in an act of defiant chutzpah, takes the spoils, throws it down in front of Hakodosh Baruch Hu. Really, for this you killed half of the Sanhedrin? For this you killed half of the Sanhedrin? So the Gemara says, in the Battle of Ai, which was the next battle after Yericho, 36 men died. That's what he means when he says a half a Sanhedrin. So the Gemara says, V'tanya, shloshim v'sheish mamish. The Rabbi Yehuda. He says literally 36 men died in the Battle of Ai. Amar lo Rabbi Nechemia v'kishloshim v'shishayu v'halo le'amar ela kishloshim v'shloshim. If you notice, the pasuk says the equivalent of 36 men died. So who died? Ela ze Yair ben Menashe. It was a great tzaddik Yair ben Menashe. Sheshakol keneged rubo shal Sanhedrin. Who was so great that he was as great. He was worthy as like 36 people, as half of the Sanhedrin. So Yoshua is upset. Yoshua's upset. So because of this, because of the money, because of the wool, because of whatever it is that Achan stole from Yericho, this is why you killed either 36 people or Yair ben Menashe. Amarav Ma'dichsiv Tachanudim Yedaber Rash Va'asher Ya'aneh Azus. What does it mean? The pasuk says that literally again, the poor man speaks in a supplicatory fashion. Right? And the rich man speaks with a bit of arrogance. So the Gemara says, who is this? So Rosh Zeh Moshe. So the poor man, this is Moshe Rabbeinu, who spoke to Hashem with a sense of humility. Va'asher Ya'aneh Azus. Who is the rich man who speaks with a little bit of arrogance? Zeh Yehoshua. This refers to Yoshua. Right? Again, especially the fact we just saw Yoshua spoke with chutzpah to Hakodosh Baruch Hu. My time, what's the reason? Because the pasuk we just mentioned, that he took the spoils that Achan stole and he threw it down in front of Hakodosh Baruch Hu. And almost like he's saying to Hakodosh Baruch Hu, why? Why? Okay, you want to punish, there's a way to punish, but why take 36 neshamas for what? For some spoils? So Yoshua spoke with a little bit of chutzpah. So the Gemara says, Atu Pinchas lo avatachi. Didn't Pinchas do the same thing? After all, the Chsiv, Vayamod Pinchas, Vayipalel, Vata'atzar Magefa. Pinchas now, so we normally translate this as Pinchas davened, and the plague, which was sweeping through the people as a result of the immorality with the daughters of Midian, stopped. So Rabbi Lazar says, it doesn't say Vayispalel, it doesn't say he davened, rather what does it say? Vayipalel. Melamed sha'asa palilos im kono. So we'll say the shoresh of paid lamed palal means to judge. So therefore, again, what does it mean? That Pinchas Kiviyachol judged Hakodosh Baruch Hu. What did he do? Ba v'chavtan. He came and he brought the bodies of Zimri and Cozbi. Right? Zimri was the Nasi. Cozbi was the Midianite princess who committed adultery and immorality in public. And he threw their bodies down in front of Hakodosh Baruch Hu. I'm going to follow Ribono Shel Olam. Al elu yiplu esrim va'arba elef miyisrael. For these two, 24,000 Jews should die. So you see that Pinchas also acted with a shtickle insolence and arrogance. So we'll say, I'll just mention vayu amesim agefa arba v'esrim elef. So let's listen to this. I'll just mention over here, this is a tremendous Gemara. Because Gemara is teaching us something about tefillah. So the Gemara just introduced the idea that the word palal means to judge. Rav Shach Hirsch brings down in Chorev the following idea. He says, we translate lehit palel as to daven. But if you think about it, that's not actually what it means, right? If the shoresh pei lamed lamed is to judge, lehit palel is the reflexive form of that verb, which means then, what does lehit palel mean? To engage in the process of personalistic judgment. Reflexive, right? So we'll say the process of tefillah, Hirsch says, is not simply davening to Hashem. Rather, tefillah is the mechanism, tefillah is the framework through which we are to engage in introspection and personal judgment. Therefore, says Rav Hirsch does something so beautiful. He says, often when it comes to tefillah, we're hyper-focused on kavana. And kavana, of course, means like perush hamilos, understanding of the words. Rav Hirsch says, essentially, it's okay to let your mind to wander. It just depends what your mind is wandering to. So if my mind is wandering, thinking about myself, thinking about my life, that's good. That's actually what tefillah is supposed to be. Tefillah is supposed to be a time of self-judgment, of self-reflection. Lehit palel doesn't simply mean to pray. Lehit palel means to engage in the process of personalistic judgment. Incredible. I will say a different way of looking at davening. So the Gemara says, Lama avarta. So again, what did Yoshua say? Yoshua says, Hakodosh Baruch Hu, why did you take us over the Jordan? This was after that defeat at the Ai. Why did you take us over the Jordan? Why, just to be defeated? So the Gemara said, Moshe may Ma'amar. So Moshe Rabbeinu also said this, Lama Hari also Lama Zeh, and the Parsha Shmos. Moshe Rabbeinu says, after going to Paro, and Paro says, Tichba ta'avoda, Moshe Rabbeinu says, why have you done something terrible to this people? Ella mehacha. Rather, it comes from here. So Yoshua says, you know what? After this defeat at Ai, Yoshua says, you know what? We should have never crossed the Jordan. We should have just stayed where we were. Yoshua, kum lach. Literally again, kum lach means get up. Now, the way the Gemara understands it is, kum lach is Hashem's telling Yoshua, you bear some of the responsibility for what has happened over here. What does this mean? Yoshua, your culpability is more intense than Klal Yisrael's. How so? Ani amarti vayav Avraham es hayardin takimu v'atam rechavkem samech mil. So the Gemara says, listen to this. So Hashem says to Yoshua like this. You know, when I commanded that when you came over the Jordan, you were supposed to set up the stones, right, upon which the Torah was to be written. You didn't do it immediately upon passing over the Jordan. Rather, where did you do it? 60 mil into the land. So Yoshua, you are also responsible because you violated my instructions. Basar, Dinafik. So after Rab Shila left, Okim Rav Amorale, Rav called over his Amora, and he said, Salz V'darish, Didarshan, Kasher Tziva Hashem es Moshe Avdo, Kein Tziva Moshe es Yoshua, V'chein Asa Yoshua, Lo Hisir Davar Mikol Asher Tziva Hashem es Moshe. So remember again, here's the problem. So on one hand, Hashem is holding Yoshua culpable for not following his directions. But yet the pasuk says that Yoshua did everything that Moshe told him, and Moshe did everything that Hashem told him. So it sounds like Yoshua was in complete compliance. So ultimately, again, Hashem says to Yoshua, you were partially responsible. Now, why were you partially responsible? This is what I will say. So watch this. Hashem never commanded Klal Yisrael not to take from the spoils of Yericho. Hashem never commanded that. That was Yoshua's prohibition. So Hashem says to Yoshua something amazing. Why are you prohibiting extra stuff? Right? If I want something prohibited, I'll tell you it's prohibited. If I don't need it prohibited, don't prohibit it yourself. Now, Yoshua did it because, again, he wanted a singular focus on war. That's what he wanted. But Hakodosh Baruch Hu says, Yoshua, I didn't ask you to create that cherem. I didn't ask you to go ahead and tell people they can't take the spoils. You introduced that, and because you introduced it, therefore, again, you are partially culpable for what happened with Achan. Incredible. Behind the Kamrile, boy ba'ai, v'asisa la'ai, ulamalka, kasha asisa li'iricho ulamalka. V'ayivi yosef shobiricha. So we'll say, so now, an incredible another. So, okay, so that's the story of Achan, and again, we'll say, why do we do all this? Because it's incredible, right? But why else did we do all of this? Because remember again, what did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah said that before a person is executed, we tell him, do vidui. Who is the source, the biblical source for vidui? So the Mishnah over here quotes Achan, right? Achan confessed his sin before being executed. We'll say, by the way, who is the real makar for vidui, for confession? The real makar for vidui is Cain. Cain was the first person to go ahead and do vidui. The difference is, the reason why that's not brought up over here is because we're looking for a source of someone who did vidui before execution. So who was the first person to do vidui before execution? That was Achan. So now that we're talking about Yoshua, it was an incredible, ridiculous Yoshua story, and we saw this already in Marasak's Brachas. Yoshua was in Yericho. He goes ahead and he sees, and the pasuk goes on to say, he sees Vahine ish omed lenegdo v'charbo shalufo biyado. He sees a man standing opposite him with a withdrawn sword. So the Gemara says, what happened? Vayomer lo ki ani sar tzeva Hashem atabasi. So now Yoshua doesn't know. He's like, who are you, friend or foe? So the man says, don't worry, I am a malach Hashem. I'm a malach. I'm only here to help. So Yoshua prostrates himself. Now remember, this was happening at night. So Yoshua, how were you able to prostrate yourself? After Rabbi Yochanan, you can't give a shalom aleichem to your friend at night. Why? Shema sheidu. You have to be concerned that maybe he's a shade. There are shadim at night. So maybe Allah Lamaisa again, maybe the person you see in front of you is not really a person but a shade. So how did Yoshua give him shalom? So the Gemara says, Shani Hazam the Kamrele Ani Sar Tzeva Hashem Atabasi. This man used the name of Hashem, and ultimately, again, because he said the name of God, Yoshua knew it wasn't a shade. Vidilma Meshakri, maybe it's a lying shade. Right? In other words, maybe he's lying, right? Maybe he's just he's saying Shalom Aleichem, right? Because he's just trying to go ahead and pretend he's not a shade. So the Gemara says, Gemiri, we have a tradition, Lo Mafki Shem Shmai Levatala. Shadim, do not go ahead and use the name of Hashem. I will say, which by the way is such a profound yisod. Right? Everyone has the line they won't cross, right? There's plenty of stuff I will do, but there's always that, oh no, I would never do that, right? Now, anything and everything in front of that, I'm all in, right? I'll do all that stuff. We all have that line. We all have that line, which is good, right? Everyone has to have that line they won't cross. So apparently, Shadim also have that line. For Shadim, again, Shadim don't use the name of Hashem in vain. Amar Bezer will say, Amarle, Amish will say, this is a ridiculous Gemara. Amarle, Amish bitaltim talmud shel ben abayim, va'achshe bitaltim talmud Torah. So listen to this. So the shade, so the Malach says to Yoshua, I'm here for two reasons. Yesterday, you neglected to offer up the daily Talmud, and tonight, you're not learning Torah. What does that mean tonight you're not learning Torah? Look at Rashi. Actually, so I understand the first part. They didn't offer up the Talmud. There's a daily sacrifice. They didn't offer up. So the Malach says, I'm here because you're culpable for that. So we'll say, what does it mean? Excuse me. Now, by the way, so he says, the Malach says specifically, you didn't offer up the afternoon Talmud. So because you didn't offer up the afternoon Talmud, so I'm here as a result of liability for that. Furthermore, tonight, you're not learning. Look at Rashi. It's the 4 lines down, last wide line, on top, on the right-hand side. Rashi's on both sides here. This is absolutely incredible. Get ready for this. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says like the following idea. That halacha l'maisa, the Gemara says, the Malach says, I understand why during the day you were fighting battle, you didn't have time to learn. I get that. Okay, you were doing battle. But at night, why are you not learning? At night, why? Do you hear this? I understand you're fighting, you're at work during the day. I understand you're at work during the day, right? You're fighting your battle during the day. I got it. But now you're not at war. There's night seder. Speak to Shmuel Armin, right? Right? I don't understand. I will say, this is such a tremendous skill. It's a long night. There's no such thing as a yid. It's beautiful that we come to the base medrash in the morning. It's incredible. That is not a patur not to learn at night. I have to learn at night. Again, ideally in a base medrash as well, because it's just a different kind of experience. So the Malach said, it's wartime. It's wartime. And the Malach comes to Yoshua and says, where is night seder? Where's night seder? What's happening over here? It's nighttime. I understand. You learned before you went out to war. The whole day you're busy with the war. But Lamaisa, now it's nighttime. Where is your learning? I will say, this is overwhelming Gemara. Because sometimes we think we've got it all figured out. I learn in the morning, I go to work, nighttime is for me to relax. Just understand, again, they were pretty busy during the day over here under Yoshua. And yet the Malach comes out of his way to say, there's no such thing at night when there is free time, not all of it, but some of that time must absolutely, unequivocally be devoted to the study of Torah. So I have to stop over here for today. We're fine. I just want to point out, we did a blot of Gemara today. We did do a blot. Wrong blot, but we did do a blot. Again, we're not going to rush. Beautiful, fine wine Gemara to be continued tomorrow. Bosai, shkoyach. All right, and a good Chodesh. Have a great day, a good Chodesh, everyone.